Did I always want to be an engineer? No, passionately not. My backstory is I've got a family of engineers. So my father was a professor of civil engineering. My uncles, I've got relatives all in the sort of engineering science profession. It was sort of embedded in me, the STEM side of things. By default, got a job in construction and sort of Costain, applied to them, brilliant company. They held a job for me while I spent 6 months travelling. And I sort of came back and was like, I'll do this for a bit and then see. But you know what? I'm good at science. I'm good at engineering. I'm creative. I'm good at maths. I like art. I want to solve some problems. I want to be challenged, but I don't want to save the world. I just want to do a job, earn some money, get on the property ladder. And those are absolutely as valid reasons as other people. And we should be saying, actually, it's all valid. Maybe sometimes we give too perfect of role models and we sort of, we're appealing to some part of the marketplace. And there are some people that are like, just, that doesn't appeal to me. I don't want to be that spokesperson. Maybe they're too perfect and maybe that does put some people off, or maybe some people think, well, that's not me, so maybe it isn't a career for me. And it's absolutely a career for everyone. If you've not got the right support network or the right environment, it can be quite hard work. And you're naturally coming to a point in your career where you may be stepping up the ladder as well. I never understand why there's a stigma or a shame around it, because it's all just chemicals. It's all chemical reactions within the body. Sometimes our chemicals in our bodies all get mixed up, which is why we have challenges with sort of our mental health as well and the neuroreceptors, but it's not made up. It's there, it's real. It disappoints me that we still need DEI initiatives. That's a world change though, but I would like her to be a world where we don't need the initiatives.
Every leader has a story to tell, and the Safe Leader podcast uncovers the diversity story behind leading figures championing change to make our world a better place. Join me, your host, Mark McBride-Wright, as we hear from business leaders, academics, entrepreneurs, and agents of change as they share their journeys of innovation, resilience, and transformation. Together, we explore how they embrace the principles of safe leadership, sharing, acting, feeling, and empowering to create safer, more inclusive environments for everyone. Welcome to another podcast of the Safe Leader podcast. I'm Mark McBride-Wright, your host, and I'm delighted today to be joined by Sally Walters, who is a discipline lead for civils and structural UK and Ireland water at Stantec, a global design and consulting firm. She brings 22 years of experience in civil and water engineering. Sally leads the technical delivery of high-quality engineering projects for clients in the water industry, with extensive experience in managing regional teams on civil engineering initiatives, particularly in water and wastewater infrastructure development. Sally is deeply committed to developing and empowering the next generation of engineers and advancing the recognition and standing of the engineering profession. She's a Fellow of the Institution of Civil Engineers, a Fellow of the Institution of Engineering and Technology, and also a Fellow of the Women's Engineering Society, as well as being a Chartered Civil Engineer. Actively working in and involved in these various professional bodies and committees, she contributes her expertise to the wider engineering community. In 2023, Sally was honoured as a finalist for the Top 50 Women in Engineering Award with a focus on safety and security. And she's also become a visiting professor at the University of Exeter. Sally, welcome.
Welcome. Thank you very much, Mark.
Really, so I think we've spoken, we've been connected on LinkedIn for a long time, but I can't remember if we've ever met in person or probably been on calls together.
Yeah, I think I connected. I think there was it might have been a Weiss Women in Construction and Engineering Awards where I think I saw you speak at a sort of day seminar before, and then I've
Yes.
sort of connected through LinkedIn and
Oh, that was a long
passionately
time
been
ago.
stalking you probably since then
Yeah.
and following you. And I think we may have been in similar events or speaking, but not. I don't think we've ever directly spoken.
So do you know that is a classic example of where we need to start building connection between communities more, which is why I'm so glad I've started this podcast, because do you know when that was? That was 2018.
Oh gosh, was it that long ago now? I feel
Yeah, it
old.
was. It was. It was at Heathrow Airport at the Women in
Yes.
Construction Engineering Awards, and myself, Diego, I think from WSP was on the panel, and I forget who else, but we were basically there to help all these women at the top of their game at the judges' day doing their presentations. Not everyone could be interviewed at the same time, so we had these panels, right? We had like this leadership panel, and that's when I came to it. Wow, I can't believe it had been that long ago.
Yeah. Well, I think the main thing I took away from that was actually that connection to yourself and following what you've been doing. So those panel sessions were brilliant just because it broke up the day for those people who were being interviewed. But actually, for me, it was sort of much more about actually I'd like to connect with them and connected with the UK Constructability Program. And I think I became a sort of one of their mentors for a year or sort of their role models as well, the UK construction team. So it was a great
Wow.
event actually, but it again, that connections and connectivity is pretty important actually.
So if we So I want us to come up to, the role that mentors play and inspiration and everything, and what importance these events play in building community. But before we get into the sort of present day and now and the future, let's go back to the
Okay.
young Sally. And did you always want to be an engineer, or was it something you came to later on in life? Or yeah, talk us
Ah,
through how you got to where you're at now.
did I always want to be an engineer? No, passionately not. My backstory is I've got a family of engineers, so I knew my father was a professor of civil engineering at the University of Exeter. Full circle, come back to that later. My uncles, I've got relatives all in the sort of engineering science profession, grandparents, mother in sort of all in engineering and teachers. So it was sort of embedded in me, the STEM side of things. But I grew up and was passionate. I don't want to be an engineer. I do not want to be. I'm probably trying to desperately
The
rebel
rebel.
against my destiny. So when I was about 15 or 16, I can remember having a dinner table conversation about what are you doing with your GCSEs? And I'd done the science and maths and I was planning my A levels. Knew I wanted to do chemistry, biology, and I'd done actually French. I thought better do maths just in case. At that time, I actually was sort of a bit like I actually wanted to be a chemical engineer and I wanted to work on really weirdly, I wanted to work on oil rigs in the North Sea. I think there was some program like kind of oil rig platform. It might have been Red Bravo or something about like oil rigs in the North Sea. And then I sort of suddenly realised that maybe that wasn't a great glamorous lifestyle, and I didn't want to do that. So I ended up doing a host of A levels, chemistry, biology, and maths, and French, and didn't quite know what to do. So thought I better go to university, better do something right. I'll settle on civil engineering as a stopgap. And I went to the university late 90s, early 2000s, and it was very popular to go and do management consultancy. I was going to work for
Right.
PricewaterhouseCooper or um, Anderson Consulting and go and be in London and loads of money. And
Yeah.
then just realised it wasn't for me. Did my degree, got to my second year of my degree, and thought I better actually get some work experience. So I started then getting into consultancy. I went to work for a consultant, then I went and worked in construction and thought, this isn't too bad. I'll stay at university for my fourth year to do my master's. Then I'll see where I'll go. And I wanted to go traveling. And so I was like, right, well, I need a job to come back to. So I sort of by default got a job in construction and sort of Costain, applied to them, brilliant company. Um, they held a job for me while I spent 6 months traveling. And I sort of came back and was like, I'll do this for a bit and then see. So my journey into it wasn't a yes, I'm passionate about being an engineer. I'm not going to go in. It wasn't one of these sort of saw engineering as saving the world at that point in time. I was like, it's just a way to pay off my debt and my student loan and pay off my traveling fees at that point.
And you know what? I think that is so refreshing to hear. The fact that you don't have to have an origin story of why you want to be an engineer, that you want to save the world.
Yeah.
Because, yeah, I mean that wasn't my motivation for coming into engineering either. And I think, well, I mean, with all the need for attraction of people into the sector, the people that we often see put out now in campaigns on social media and everything, it's as if there is that, because they're achieving such great things, it can seem a little bit too. overwhelming or daunting that maybe my ambition isn't to solve wastewater management in Africa. Maybe I just want to have a simple life where I'm earning my living and doing an occupation that pays a good wage, and that can be an equally valid reason to come into engineering.
Oh, absolutely. And it's interesting because I think it changes at different points in your career as well as you sort of become, as your sort of needs are met, once you've sort of maybe got a house or you've got your family, then your sort of drives change as well. But there's absolutely nothing wrong with going to a career like, "Well, you know what, I'm good at science, I'm good at engineering, I'm creative, I'm good at math. I like art. I want to solve some problems. I want to be challenged, but I don't want to save the world. I just want to do a job, earn some money, get on the property ladder." And those are absolutely as valid reasons as other people. And we should be saying actually every avenue and every drive and every passion
Mm.
or every sort of purpose has, it's all valid.
Do you think we might ironically be turning people off by positioning engineering as this, you have to be in it to want to change the world?
I
I don't know.
think
Maybe. Hadn't
uh,
thought of it this way.
maybe, yeah, I probably haven't thought of that. I think that maybe, as you say, maybe sometimes we give too perfect a role models and we sort of, we're appealing to some part of the marketplace. And there are some people that like just, that doesn't appeal to me. I don't want to be that spokesperson. Maybe they're too perfect and maybe that does put some people off, or maybe some people think, well, that's not me, so maybe it isn't a career for me. And, you
Mm,
know, it's it's absolutely a career for everyone actually, and it's great. It's such a versatile career, but yeah, you don't have to have it mapped out, I think.
true. True. The squiggly career movement that I've seen get a bit
Absolutely.
of traction. That you can have a squiggly journey into engineering, and also like once you're here and working within it. Um, Do you find yourself still doing a lot of technical work, or is it what I usually see is people who become more experienced, like yourself, you move into more program leadership, project management, oversight, and things like that?
Yeah, so I probably yeah, the more significant proportion of my time is sort of now people leadership, program leadership, but it is problem solving just in a different level. So it's still,
Yeah.
for me, it was interesting because I had a debate with someone a while ago who was like, I don't see myself as a civil engineer anymore because I'm not doing the on the tool civil engineering type of the thought that, like not doing slab design or not designing pipelines or but then I was like, but I'm a civil engineer and I've always like now, that's my home, that's my discipline, that's my sort of where I naturally would tag myself as my profession. But I'm helping in these upfront look at those need statements, trying to solve the problem at the top end, going actually what's going on? Let's delve into that, and then helping bring the people in and the right people. And part of the problem solving is getting the right people, getting the right solution, and getting them in the right direction to then do maybe more the sort of everyday engineering. So yeah, I've moved into much more program and people leadership, but
Mm.
it is quite nice occasionally because you do get do you when you're doing that program leadership, you do get to go into meetings and talk the technical. And when you get that, there's always the engineer in you that's like, actually, right, can we go into the detail? And oh, actually, have you thought about doing this? So
Mm.
it's quite nice and sort of get that buzz occasionally of being able to go in and do
You're
some
able to
technical.
make the cross connections between different groups that you might then interact with across the business. I guess by virtue of the role that you've got, you must interact with teams all around the country. You've got UK and Ireland in your remit, so that must bring with it such great regional diversity, but also technical diversity within the water sector.
It's a brilliant. I'm driven by people and connections and sort of, going and meeting our different teams in our different offices. And, we have different, depending on our clients, we work with, in the water business, we work with pretty much all the water utilities across the country, UK and Ireland. They've all got different drivers, they've all got different priorities, different challenges. So you have different skill sets, whether it's not just civil engineering, which is my base sort of discipline, but we work with urban drainage modelers, we work with sort of process engineers, we work with structural, we work with environmentalists, we work with sort of asset planning and program management, so a whole sector of it. And yeah, you have to connect with everyone to understand actually all of our projects are always multidisciplinary engineering projects and sort of environmentalist program, project management, planning, environmental, everything comes into it. So yeah, you have to be involved with everyone. It's great.
So I don't really know much about the water sector or the wastewater sector. I see it when things go wrong and it hits the news, like most consumers, I guess.
Yeah.
Um, what can you tell us a bit about the water sector and how it's set up and what the
Oh
opportunities are?
yeah, of course. It's a really exciting like sector actually. Everyone always jokes when you say wastewater, it's really great, it's really glamorous, and everyone's like, really? I used to get the nickname of being called Dr. Pooh because I was studying for a master's in philosophy. Didn't quite get to the PhD bit, so but aside from that, it's fascinating. The water sector, obviously, most people know we've got sort of our regional water companies, whether sort of, the big companies like Thames and Southern in Yorkshire. We've got the Scottish Water, the UK and Ireland. We've got Irish Water and everything. So we've got all regional water companies. They're set up into a 5-year frameworks effectively, and it's called this AMP period, the Asset Management Plan, which is their 5-year program. And so every 5 years, they come out with a new plan, and they've got a 5-year investment portfolio. And what we do is we work with them at all stages of that sort of plan in that 5-year program. You tend to sort of bid for being on these big 5-year or 10-year frameworks with them to cover that work. Stantec's not very popular. We've been very successful in sort of bidding for sort of our frameworks. Now we're about to go into the asset management period 8. They started when it went into privatisation, which is, if you count every 5 years, we're now in the 40th year, I think. So that will start in March 2025. And the investment that's coming in AMP8 is about double, if not triple, what we've had in previous AMPs to address quite a lot of the political challenges around sort of storm overflows, sort of the pollutions in our rivers and seas that we're seeing, and how we solve all that. And it's a fantastic period because obviously it's not just wastewater, it's clean water, it's human health. But there's a lot more that you don't see. There's a lot of environmental programs that are done that sort of, you know, guardians of sort of like the environment, where you've got reservoirs, where you've got sort of peatlands, peat bogs, and catchment systems and management. So I think everyone thinks it's just the sewage treatment works and your pipeline, or your water treatment works and your networks, but actually there's an awful lot of sort of additional stuff that's done around that and obligations that we all help them with. And so we need people and engineers who are involved in every single element of that. So they're really exciting nature-based solutions that we're doing, sort of like green solutions, helping companies drive to their carbon targets, through to sort of, the exciting engineering projects of building storage and treatment works that they need, but looking at different ways of doing it as well.
So what's the current diversity status, or well, if we stay a
Yeah.
level above, like what's the skills deficit? Is there a skills deficit in the water sector? Is there an undersupply of engineers or people interested in the sector? What's the composition of the sector? What?
Yeah,
Yeah.
we like any other engineering, probably civils engineering is the most diverse, I would probably say, of all the engineering disciplines. Maybe we get stretched to 20% in terms of female, male, but obviously
Mhm.
there are other diversity mixes and sort of balances. The, the water sector, well, in engineering in general, to meet all the skills challenges across all of our sectors, I think, we're probably short about 40,000 engineers. I think the Royal Academy of Engineering did a study,
Mm.
and we're just not getting the supply of engineers in when you look at sort of the engineers leaving, not returning to the business, and the skills gap. We have that huge skills challenge in the water sector. Um, Obviously, publicity doesn't help because people see it as a challenging environment to work in. Um, I think when you're in it, it's hugely rewarding, and what you're doing is actually changing the benefit for society. And I think there is a recognition of what the engineers are doing is actually trying to make things better and trying to sort of drive that change. But yeah, we've got our diversity challenges, we've got our sort of at all levels, and sort of trying to attract people. I know we joke about it, but is it a sexy career? Probably not. Um, but there's huge benefits. Like, you are fundamentally providing water that people need for, safe drinking water. Has to be fit for human consumption. It's human health. You're trying to make improvements to the environment and balancing those sustainable challenges of how do we grow, how do we keep what we're used to in society,
Mm.
whilst keeping the environment, addressing those climate crisis challenges that we've got as well. So that's a challenge. Yeah.
Tell us a bit about then your role at the Women's Engineering Society. Congratulations on being in the top 50 women in engineering. That the safety and security. That's fascinating. How has the work? How has that accolade helped you professionally? What it must help with some of those skills shortages that you mentioned,
Mm.
having lists like this, being able to spotlight the achievements of women engineers, must be a great way to actually signpost to young people, look, if you can, the whole phrase, if you can't see it, you can't be it. Well, this is designed to show that people are being it and therefore you can be it.
I think you've actually hit the nail on the head there. It's that advocacy role. So sort of awards like that were fantastic. It was really great to be recognised. Sort of recognise that, I think safety comes at all levels, and so all of us have a responsibility. But being involved with WES and sort of these awards absolutely allow you to demonstrate to people you can achieve, you can be a female in sort of engineering. There are great opportunities. You can be yourself, hopefully, sort of being a role model, but seeing authentic role models as well. That's what I hope, and you can promote them. So going along to events, showing children that actually, we get images. Great, you can be on site. It can be boots and hard hats and driving cranes. Absolutely, you can do that. You can be in an office and it's clean, and it's just sitting at a computer working with teams and designs. It's going on site. There's all sort of levels, but it's showing people that there can be really rewarding careers. You can get a lot out of it, and you can just be yourself. But as you say, highlighting and showing and demonstrating that there are people doing this every single day, and it doesn't have to be some big, amazing, iconic project that you're working on, or you know every day there are superheroes sort of working on projects that you
Mm.
might not even know about and stuff. So I think that's what's really key, and sort of working with Wes on those role model programs and sort of those going into sort of promotional opportunities, just to sort of, as you say, keep on banging the drum. We've been doing it for years, but we still need to do it, and we need role models across the sort of demographics to show that people it is an accessible career, and it's a great career.
But the recent data, though, from Engineering UK shows that the number of women is at the highest level ever leaving the profession in the age,
Yeah.
35 to 54 age bracket, I think it was, from the August 2024 data set. So, we do all this work trying to attract people into a system which fundamentally isn't like retaining the individuals that have
Yeah.
come in. So I wonder, what are some of the barriers that still exist to that retention? What do you think?
Well, there's quite a lot, and there is, it's difficult because, I'm 44. I'm sort of mid that age band. I've had my son, he's 12, so I was early 30s. I've been through that challenge, and I didn't put my career on hold. I went part time. I don't see it as putting it on hold. I don't begrudge doing that. It can be challenging to find the right employer that can support sort of those flexible arrangements. I think the COVID effect of being able to do much more hybrid working should have made it easier. Maybe it
Yeah,
hasn't, I'm not sure. But the barriers are sort of, the want, if you've got childcare or caring responsibilities of any level, a lot of us sort of aging parental populations as well, those challenges and the onus that falls on sort of yourselves and family members potentially. Um, and it is a difficult time. I've just sort of, I'm happy to talk about it. I've been going through the perimenopause, and I don't think there's a lot more awareness coming up to it now. And I think, sometimes you get oversaturated with conversations about it, but
okay.
it is a huge impact. And moving into that phase, it does affect you, especially if you don't get the support or the sort of opportunity to talk about it, or even awareness of some of the symptoms, and the build up are very slow and can actually challenge you in sort of, and it's challenged me in my own role. So there's a lot of factors, I think, that can make it difficult. And if you've not got the right support network or the right environment, it can be quite hard work. And you're naturally coming to a point in your career where you may be stepping up the ladder as well. And sometimes I saw an interesting post on LinkedIn, and I'm not sure I disagree actually. It was saying that, sometimes when you're looking over the barrier or the wall to the next level or those senior leadership roles, they do sometimes come with more travel, more expectation of being further away. And if you are a sort of a parent, do you want to be putting yourself into that position? And maybe the balance of in a relationship you're in, it doesn't allow you to do that. So
Yeah.
do you stay? And so I think there are quite a lot of nuances around, and I'm not sure those are the answers, but those are certainly sort of my personal experiences. If I know I've been challenged around my childcare, around my son and my commitments, of my own personal health journey and
Yeah.
understanding that impact on it. And I wasn't. I'm very, very lucky. I've had a fantastic line manager and support network in Stantec actually. And it wasn't until I was talking to a colleague and a friend outside, but for another company, when I said, "Oh, I talked to my line manager about it because I didn't feel I wanted to be honest because I thought I was being a little bit irrational and maybe my
Mhm.
judgment." And before I started HRT, and I was like,
Mhm.
actually, I don't think I was quite not sane, but sometimes emotionally charged with some of the decisions.
Yeah.
And my friend was like, "Well, you're lucky you can talk to your line manager. I would never be able to do that." And so I think
Yeah.
I've been fortunate, and maybe other people don't have that experience as well.
I'm really glad you said that because that was I was gonna yeah, it was my next question. we we've seen um in the last I would say 4 or 5 years, menopause has really been is having a light now shone on it.
Mm,
I've read some really interesting things on this recently. Um, there was a LinkedIn post yesterday around someone where her friend had unfortunately taken her own life because she just couldn't handle the what she was going through
yeah,
with the menopause, the perimenopause, and not a lot of people recognise that 25% of women who will go through menopause will experience deep depression.
yeah,
And when you think about the compound inequity that's exists through, you know, male privilege, it getting dismissed so flippantly, as just one of those things,
yeah,
that you just have to endure when actually it can have such catastrophic consequences for people when not managed correctly. And the fact that that management is now available, but isn't being accessed because there's still a taboo around even being able to talk about it. So, I mean, Matt, the I watched a couple of years ago. Davina McCall did a
mm,
brilliant documentary on menopause, and I think it led to the not the patches, but the cream that you can
yeah,
put on that absorbs through the skin, selling out.
yeah,
And,
yeah,
and then there being a shortage of supply of it, and you know, but then I read another article as well talking about companies are clever, Generation Z young women coming through the ranks now are the first generation that have got the most what's the word, dispensable income, you know what I mean,
yeah.
like income that you
Disposable.
can spend as
Yeah,
disposable, thank you, disposable income. And so these companies are marketing all these products and things to you, and they'll get your money, but guess what, your headaches and everything and pains and all that are still going to be there. This stuff's
mm,
a bit of a fad, and does it actually really help? So it's almost like a market being created around menopause inclusion. So we've created at Eco Engineers a menopause network, a cross sector network group on menopause. It's my colleague Fayon
brilliant.
Dixon who wanted to set it up, and I was like, absolutely, I have no experience in this space, so it needs to be led by someone living through it. I'm a big believer in that, grounded lived experience when it comes to the leadership of these
Yeah.
network groups. And she calls it fan club. She calls it fan club because, she gets hot sometimes and she loves her fan.
That's a
Um,
brilliant name. I've seen some awful ones, which actually just make me look at it and go, "Really? I don't want to be in that group." But
but do you know what? We've had people who, have had to go through the menopause in their 20s because
yeah,
they've been diagnosed with endometriosis or something. So to alleviate those pains, they've chosen to have a hysterectomy, and so that's then induced menopause early on in life. So then the reconciliation of making decisions on, well, I'm never going to have a family then, or I'm not going to have my family in the way in which I had originally thought I would. So there is a whole chapters, a whole field of conversation to happen here. And I tell you now, straight men that are in heterosexual relationships with wives or girlfriends, partners, whatever, you know, I don't think this conversation is even happening. you know, the comfort level to have that, and so I think this is me. I think we're at a really exciting time, if that's the right adjective, when it comes to women's equality in the workplace with this conversation now happening, because I hope we can see a real confidently supportive network of men now coming forward to support workplace policies that means the conversation can be had if it's
yeah.
something that
Well,
someone's going through.
it should be being had because there's a whole generation of, as you say, heterosexual men who, if they're in relationships or sort of married or partners, who at some point will go through this. And
Yeah,
as you said, there are women who've gone through endometriosis and who have had early hysterectomies. There are cancer survivors who
yeah,
go through chemotherapy, sort of triggers early menopause. But actually, the perimenopause can start from the late 30s. Where we don't realize our hormone levels drop. So, you can be living with that slow buildup. And I never understand why there's a stigma or a shame around it because it's all just chemicals. It's all chemical reactions within the body. It's a natural,
yeah,
sometimes our chemicals in our bodies all get mixed up, which is why we have challenges with sort of our mental health as well and the neuroreceptors. But it is chemical. It's not made up. It's there.
yeah.
It's real, and men go through sort of similar when their testosterone levels drop and their challenges. But that affects us so
Mm,
quickly. Those difference in balances in hormones, and we're so sort of finely tuned. But as you're right, women are dismissed quite easily about it, and I was dismissing my own symptoms because they creep up on you and you don't realize, and they can be similar to any symptoms. And if you don't track them, I've got a thyroid issue, similar symptoms track with that, with the sort of the perimenopause. And it wasn't until I was actually sort of almost breaking down in tears on a phone call with a sort of colleague. And she said, "Sally, have you gone to the doctors?" And, we talked a little bit about perimenopause, maybe it was. Just go to the doctors and just talk to them. Because if you get on HRT within 2 weeks, you'll feel human again.
yeah,
And I can remember, and I went to the doctors and they said, "Well, let's try it because there's no harm. There's very few side effects." But and it was a miracle. Within a
wow,
week, I felt more human. And actually, subsequent to that, I've spoken to other people and they've gone on it and they're like, "You know what? I feel there's no, you don't feel physically different, but mentally you feel like a cloud
yeah,
has lifted or
yeah,
you feel empowered again." And it's like, if I hadn't gone through that, then I probably would be looking at my career going, "I can't take the next step. I couldn't take that step up and
mm,
I couldn't take that challenge because actually I can't deal with the pressure or it feels too much." So actually, for me, there was a big step in that, actually going, right, I now feel stronger and more confident and happier and more relaxed than maybe I did 2 years ago. Changes in roles as well, and a bit more change of emphasis and support from the company. But actually, I'm feeling like, come on, bring it on. I'm ready and
yeah,
I'm
totally.
empowered and for the next phase of my career than maybe I was maybe 3 or 4 years ago.
So it sounds to me like there needs to be some sort of campaign, initiative, program, mentoring. I don't know what the word is, but some spotlight focused on this because this links to another point that comes to front of mind when it comes to gender equality. We always talk about the positive stuff, or the opportunity, but I read such a good book by, she's now become a good friend, Susie Levy, Mind the Gap, on and it's a very good introduction to inclusion of different demographics. And she shares her perspective as a white woman, learning about different groups. But in the chapter on gender equality, she makes the point that until our workplace programs start addressing the darker side of inclusion, the domestic violence against women and young children, young girls, sexual assault, sexual harassment, predatory behavior, all that sort of crap, quite frankly,
Yeah,
that women
yeah,
have to put up with, until we start talking about that in the same conversation as the barriers,
yeah,
because that is some of the barriers, we're not really then going to properly be holding men accountable for then not doing the self-surveillance between one another about what
yeah,
is and is not acceptable. And given that we are a gender imbalance in engineering massively,
yeah,
85% men, 15% women, you know, that is not happening. And until that happens, baking in the conversation that we've just had about menopause and the barriers that women go through, I just think we're going to keep doing these programs and initiatives expecting something to change, but
yeah,
it
yeah.
doesn't.
And do you know what? Actually, it's very prevalent timing. I work with the institutions as well, so the Institution of Civil Engineers, Institution of Engineering Technology, Institute of Water, and there's been a bit of a survey that was been done quite recently around sort of the experience of sort of females across the age range within the engineering industry.
Okay.
And sort of the sexual harassment, are you still experiencing? Do you experience from the forms of sort of the microaggressions to
Yeah.
being the butt of a sexist joke that's not directed at you but in the room with you, through to the direct sort of indirect sort of like the sort of people not taking no when you say no, I don't want to come for a drink with you. No, I don't want to go out with you. Through to the direct sort of sexual assault situations, and it still happens, and it still happens when alarmingly, the percentage of sort of 85% of women have reported some form of aggression, whether that be the butt of a sexist joke or a wolf whistle, through to the much more serious. And the law is actually changing in the UK, or has been changed. Um, so much more onus on sort of employers to sort of be far more proactive rather than reactive around it, which is fantastic. But we all need to have that conversation. We need to be realistic, and we need to be challenging and driving that, not scaring women off, but we need to be saying to the men, actually, that isn't acceptable, and we shouldn't still have to do it, but we
Yeah.
still do. And even to the point of I've had this conversation quite a lot around, the terminology around male conversations of he's ambitious. Right? Is ambitious being code word for aggressive? Whereas a
Mm.
woman, oh, she's pretty aggressive. Why can't she be ambitious? And we
Mhm.
just find that, and I think it's baked in. And I genuinely think, and sometimes, and this isn't excusing it, some people don't even realize that they're doing that. But
Yeah.
you pick up. I was in a
Oh.
meeting the other day, and someone was called guys, girls, and I was like, actually, calling the girls girls is about saying, like, you might as well be addressing us as boys than girls. I
Mm-hmm.
know there's a natural flow sometimes to saying guys and girls,
Mm-hmm.
but actually, I'm not a girly. I'm not a girl. I'm
Yeah.
far beyond it. I can tell you, I don't get ID'd for alcohol at the
Yeah.
supermarket anymore, so there's nowhere near anywhere, But
Yeah.
it's all those levels of there's from that level of change, which is minimal harm, through to the significant change. We do need to speak up, and we do need to support people, and we need the industry, we need everyone to drive that change, whether it's our businesses, whether it's the institutions being very much more vocal about it, really good at saying, let's do this initiative for Women in Engineering Day, let's drive this to increase the percentage of women in engineering. But we quite discreetly sort of we do these surveys, but we don't communicate the survey findings or the next steps, because we don't want to offend or publicize the fact that this is still happening, and it
Yeah.
it happens across a lot of those sort of gender diversity challenges, and sort of misogyny, racism, and whatever.
Yeah.
There is a dark side to every side of our businesses, aren't there? And we do have to talk about them.
And take action on them.
Yes,
You know,
absolutely.
like
Sorry, yeah,
making
not
action.
just talk.
such a big believer in linking it all back to
Yeah,
safety. I really am. I just, it's why
yeah,
I'm doing the work that I do now, because we would never tolerate a high rate of loss of life due to any physical hazards, so why should we tolerate people being in a mental space where they feel like they cannot exist and therefore they're contemplating taking their own life due to a lack of psychological safety and being able to
yeah.
be open. So why would we allow perpetrators continue to have and behave in this way in our organizations? We
Absolutely.
have communication mechanisms supposedly in the industry for escalating things, for reporting hazards. We should have a similar sort of process in within our businesses for elevating these aspects. Of course, the real extreme business case is bullying, harassment,
Yeah.
sexual harassment becomes employment tribunals and reputational damage if an individual chooses not to be silenced by an NDA, and then you've got all the damage that comes with that. Um,
It's an interesting, yeah, it was a conversation I had with a colleague a couple of months ago, actually, around those HR sort of, when those challenges do come up, and when you've had a few people HR elements, is why do we not treat those, like a riddle, like in a health and
yeah,
safety, as you say, like a near
exactly.
miss? We have these situations where sort of, there's a grievance maybe from a sort of colleague to another colleague. We for the sake of sort of, obviously there are confidentiality things linked with their like employees and its personal data, and but actually also at the same time we should be investigating those as this is a near miss. What's gone on? What's happened? Let's treat this, investigate it, not just from the individual perspective, but as a business about the systems and the processes to actually avoid it happening again. So yeah, fully there. It shouldn't be allowed. Everyone needs to be able to come to work and be their natural, authentic selves in a safe environment. And why wouldn't we want that? And it just feels that, yeah,
How can we make that happen then?
I would love to say we just make it happen, but it won't happen, will it? You've got to, but there is a financial impact to all of this, isn't there? And I think fundamentally businesses are driven by finance, whether the financial consequences of it. There are the moral and ethical things, and I think most of us do that. But as a corporate entities, it's the numbers, isn't it? And all of this can be tied back to it. You say an individual leaving a company, there's always a cost to recruitment and hiring and replacing an individual. There's always costs. As you say, heaven forbid it ever gets to that point of tribunals, massive costs. But actually, the time and costs of management of just dealing with challenges and HR issues is huge.
Yeah,
Even if it doesn't even lead to the loss of an employee, it can take hours and hours. So if you added up those costs, we should be looking at going, okay, as well as the right thing to do and what we want to do for our retention issues, we should be looking at these things from a right. If we monetize it and go, actually, guys, we're going to be spending 5 grand just to resolve this thing over the next 2 months. It's ridiculous. How do we do it properly? How do we do it? How would we manage it on a health and safety
yeah,
perspective? Yeah. I,
yeah.
I'm not sure. I'm just thinking off the top of my head,
No,
but
no, I love it. That
absolutely.
these you've no idea the number of ideas that are getting generated here in my brain for what we could do subsequently. As a dot joiner collaboration entity. Yeah, I love it. I love it. I think there's heaps of ideas in there. I love that analogy of treating it like an incident investigation, near miss, lessons learned, share the findings, no blame culture.
Mm,
Doesn't happen again, or it might happen again, but if it does happen again, we're better prepared to then respond to it quicker, and we can then build on the learning from it happening again and iteratively improve behaviors over time that then we gradually
yeah.
phase out these attitudes.
It's like the seatbelt, isn't it? The seatbelt, when it was first introduced, no one wanted to, but then it made law, and actually now we just wouldn't consider not. But we know the severe impacts and risks. You've got to introduce these things, but it takes time. But for me, as businesses, and this isn't like taking it from Stantec, but lots of businesses I've been in and been around where people are involved, we don't like dealing with bad, we don't like giving bad news. We don't like being the bad person. So actually, people management is inherently done poorly wherever you go, because people don't like to say, actually, do you know that behavior is wrong, or we need to change that behavior, or actually you need to, you need to do better at your job. Actually, you're not performing. We're so scared of doing that, and I am as well. I'm terrible at giving critical feedback. You've got to build up the courage to do it. You
Yeah.
pull on your jacket and your big girl's pants and say, right, okay, got to deal with this. But it costs businesses so much money and
Yeah.
so much time, and it's not fair to individuals either by just allowing things to continue and sort of the reputations people can get based on all of this. So in
Yeah.
theory, it's a win-win if you actually address it early, but we've got to train people, we've got to develop people, we've got to create a culture where, as you say, you can challenge these things, but it's challenged in the right way, and it's actually about driving change for a positive and actually growing and helping develop people so they know their behaviors are maybe wrong or the attitudes are right, and challenge them, because we're all people based on unconscious bias as
Yeah.
well and a nurture nature thing. So not excusing behaviors. Some behaviors can't be excused, but some people, it's just about helping them learn and grow and develop.
Absolutely. Oh, there's so many ideas here. So tell us a bit about your visiting professorship at Exeter.
Yeah, so I'm fairly new into it. So started it in sort of September 2024. So sort of transitioning into my first year in it. It's fantastic. I've got a great glamorous title, Professor of Innovation, Intelligent Innovation or something. But
Ooh.
that's based on the concepts that there are four pillars of innovation. So it's not just, it's people, product, processes, and I can't even remember the fourth one, but I think it's, around
You wrote the
money and stuff.
application a long time ago, I bet
Yes,
you.
I
So
yes.
I know
Uh,
I've been there. I know it. You're like, oh, what did we write again? Because it's a day a month notionally, isn't it? For a
yeah,
year, for 3 years. So
yeah.
it's not your full time role. It doesn't occupy your brain 100% of the time. So absolutely, I get, I
It's
get that.
it's very much about transitioning that sort of industry learning into academia. So and vice versa, taking it back, but really sort of helping the students actually develop the skills quite early to actually help them take the academic side of it into the industrial world, and what we do with what they learn at university, how we're sort of using sort of processes, systems, how we operate and how we work. Because I think when you sort of start at university, it's like you're very fresh from school, and it's a whole new world of working and learning. And reality, if we think back to what we learned at university, how much do we actually use?
Mm.
Even within the first year, you need those concepts, but actually, it's translating those concepts into a business world, and that could be quite a scary transition.
Yeah. Yeah,
But
totally.
it's a lot around doing that working. So it's actually very active live. So it's working, lecturing to the students about this is actually an introduction to what the industrial world is in terms of consultancy or engineering and how you might involve. I think the first lecture I ever did was on the fourth industrial revolution and how we use it in consultancy. A lot of it's digital, like internet of things, big
Yeah.
data, which we do every day. And it's trying to make it go, guys, what you're doing and what you're absolutely set up to as this generation is what we need and what we're doing every day. And actually, what we're doing now will be out of date by the time they come to graduate in 4 years'
Mm.
time, and they'll be much more through with the lecturers to then go actually into your course modules. Maybe we could get some field studies, or maybe we could do some projects and sponsorship. So it's
Exciting.
very much looking at processes, systems, bringing people in and making them more worldly, I suppose, helping them bridge that gap.
Brilliant. Sounds brilliant. Sounds really, really good. Yeah, I'm 2 years into my one at UCL, and so I'm in my final year, sort of figuring out what legacy will be, and yeah, so I've got some ideas on the tools that I want to leave behind for the
Mm,
university to use, but also for me to then use with other universities in terms of helping the curriculum on
yeah.
embedding ED&I and some assessments that they can do as part of their design projects and so on and so forth. So yeah, it's a nice it brings a nice little dimension of diversity to your professional life at this point in your career because it helps you like reconnect. But actually, full circle, you said for you, you studied at
Yeah.
Exeter, didn't you? So what's it like going back to where you
Uh,
studied?
do you know, I think I'm intrinsically linked through my whole life. I think sometimes, you get a golden thread, they say in stories, or when you're doing bids
Yeah.
or stuff. I think Exeter University is the golden thread in my life.
All right.
My father actually started working at Exeter University before I was even born, although
Oh,
we were based in Chester. And when I was 3 months old, we moved to Exeter. And he's been at the university until he retired. I can remember growing up visiting his labs at the uni. I then did my first degree at Nottingham, University in Nottingham. I got my master's, and then after a couple of years of working in construction, I went to do a knowledge transfer partnership at Exeter
ah,
University and did my
right,
master's of philosophy there. So I sort of arced back at that point.
right.
Um, then I've been based in and around Exeter since sort of doing that that MPhil, sorry, master's of philosophy. Because I was too lazy to do the doctorate. I just couldn't. I'm not very good at like staying power. I
No.
loved doing the research for a couple of years, but I couldn't have done the PhD.
Yeah, it is a long
Um,
slog. Yeah.
yeah, so I decided to go into the commercial world and earn some money rather than doing more research, but loved it and loved that being around that environment because actually, that learning's great, but just not for the long term. And you know, so over the last sort of 20 odd years, I've touched base back and forth, done the odd guest lecture, and then an old colleague who's now at the university, I was talking to him and he'd asked me to come and present something. And I'd been there for a day, a poster presentation or something. And I was like, I love this environment. I love the energy that you get from being around the students and just that whole, there is a buzz to it. Sort
Yeah.
of, that energy, that's all I can say, that energy
Yeah.
and being around them, you feel so inspired. And,
Yeah.
you know, I wanted to be a bit more involved with it. And he said, look, I think we could get something. We could maybe do a visiting professor. It'd be great. Your knowledge, your leadership, bringing it to the university, talking to the students about it, and sort of my opportunity as sort of, being there. Just, yeah, just brilliant. And that's where it came from. And so, yeah, I've gone sort of winding thread all the way through. So,
Yeah. Oh, it's
um,
amazing.
So now I can say to my father, who was a genuine professor, that I'm now the second Professor Walters at Exeter University. So
Fantastic. Fantastic. Right. Quick fire questions then. What is the most rewarding part of your job?
people, the people.
What's one habit that has helped you stay organized and efficient as a leader?
Creating time in my diary, actually giving space to be able to do the thinking tasks, the strategic tasks. So being very purposeful about that.
Okay. Tea or coffee?
Tea.
What's the best piece of career advice you've ever received?
It was probably two. Don't rush into management too early in your career because you'll still have another 20 years to do it. And be curious. Stay curious about everything, about your learning, your development, and people.
What's your go to productivity hack?
Create time in my diary.
I was going to say, yeah, probably is that. What book or resource would you recommend to someone interested in water engineering or leadership?
It was probably a resource. It's podcasts. I'm obsessed by them. I've read numerous books, loads of them. I couldn't necessarily recommend a specific one but podcasts, listen to them, leadership podcasts, high performance podcasts, any podcast, safer podcast. Just
Yeah.
they're great to put on when you're on a train or you're driving somewhere and just being able to learn without necessarily having to read the books.
Yeah. Oh, love that. I find myself, sorry, I knew I said I'd do quick fire. I find myself in the car sometimes being like, yes, yes, when when I agree with a point that a guest is making or a host is making.
And
And
then
I'm
you're
like,
driving and you're
where's
like,
the
oh no, I
audience?
wanted to write down that book or that reference. And you have to go back and listen to it because there are references they make. And you're like, I need that one.
If you could make one change in the engineering industry, what would it be?
It disappoints me that we still need DEI initiatives. I just,
Mm.
that's a world change though. Um, but I would like her to be a world where we don't need the initiatives.
And finally, what advice would you give to your younger self?
Be patient. It's the journey. I know it's stereotypical and it's probably something you say when you get to this age in this part of your career, but everything, the age-old one door opens and another opportunity. You don't always see the
Yeah.
benefits of those opportunities till you're a bit further down the path, and never compare. Don't compare yourself to someone else, because your journey and your path is completely different. It might seem that they're ahead, but you don't know where they're at, and maybe you're just not meant to be there yet because you're not ready to be there.
Very good point. Very good. Well, I've really enjoyed this, Sally. Thank you
Thank
very much for
you.
giving up your time today to come and talk. If any of our listeners want to get in touch with you, how do they do that?
You can find me on LinkedIn. It's probably the easiest way to get in touch with me. I'm pretty active on there, so yeah, just reach out to me.
Fabulous. We'll put a link in there in the show notes. Thank you very much. Really enjoyed our chat,
Thank you.
and
It's been great.
I'm sure we can pick up on some of this stuff that's been mentioned. There's been some brilliant ideas you've shone a light on, and I think working collectively we can maybe try and make DEI not part of our conversation within
I don't want to do you out
the.
of a job, Mark, but it'd be lovely
Well,
to be in
that's
that world.
true. That's true. But it'd be a great job to be done out of. But the learning continues, doesn't it? So
Yes.
even if you do shift, the work needs to be done to keep the shift in place. So there's always going to be work to be done.
Yeah. Fantastic. Thank you, Mark.
Thank you. Thanks, Ellie. See you soon. You have been listening to the Safe Leader podcast, uncovering the diversity story behind leading figures championing change to make our world a better place. If you have enjoyed the episode, please subscribe to the Safe Leader podcast on your podcast platform of choice and get notified when a new episode goes live. Did you know that we also offer a full transcript on each of our podcast episodes? Check out my website, markmcbride-wright.com. Here, you can also explore the training, coaching, and keynote speaking services I offer. And whilst you're there, why not join the Safe Leader community by subscribing to the Safe Leader Insights mailing list? Thank you for listening, and please come back and join us on a future episode.